to the April. I'd like to welcome you to the April National Heritage Area Best Practices call. As you can tell, things are a little different this month because I'm coming in remotely here. But Liz Viemeyer has agreed to kind of facilitate the call since I'm doing this on my phone. So how we're going to do this is in just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Essex and they're going to talk. And then I'm going to turn it over to Hudson River Valley and they're going to share, and they're going to be talking about trail related projects that they have worked on. And so we'll do it like normal. We'll have Essex share, and then we'll have Hudson River Valley share, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So without any further ado, I'd like to thank the Heritage Areas for participating and for joining on. And as usual, we will be recording this. So if you have to jump off or don't get to stay on to the Q&A at the end, we will be recording it. So without any further ado, Annie, would you like to share about the Boston to Border Trail, or the Border to Boston Trail? It's Border to Boston.
It's border. It's the border being a New Hampshire border. So sure, can everybody hear me okay? I'll get started, and Heather Goss is on our staff, and she'll probably add some comments too. The Border to Boston Rail Trail. It is on old railroad rights of way. It's about 70 miles. It links 20 communities, most of which are in our heritage area. It starts at the New Hampshire border and goes down to Boston. It's not complete, but large sections of it are finally completed now. So here it is. It's a shared use. It's for bikes and hiking. The surface of the trail is mixed. Some of it's stones, dust, and some of it's paved. It's, in addition to being an important trail for us, it also connects to a very important trail, the East Coast Greenway, which is a 3,000-mile trail that's gradually being built from Maine to Florida. So when this all gets done, that'll be incredibly exciting. But we're pleased to be part of this bigger effort that's underway to really provide essentially the Appalachian Trail, but for bikes and for walking along the East Coast. In our region, as it says here in these notes, it's a very important community connector. The parts of the trail that are completed, many of the parts of the trail go right through the center of communities, because this was, again, following an old railroad rights of way. And so there are town centers and stores and schools and parks along this trail right of way. And so in the places where the trail is completed, it's providing not only a great recreational access point, but also really some neat connections for kids to get to school, for people to get to parks. Just a very important trail. So the Essex National Heritage Area has been involved. Well, okay, let's go a little bit of history. So as I said, it's a railroad right of way, starting in about the 1840s in this region, the Essex County region, which is north of Boston, Massachusetts. There was a frenzy of building private railroads to take the goods that came into the port cities along the Atlantic coast and move it inwards, move it into the raw materials, into the factories that were located along our upper part of our heritage area, along the Merrimack River in particular, and then take the finished goods from the Merrimack River, big mill cities like Lowell and Lawrence, and take it out, spread it across the country. So the frenzy of building railroads. You can see, I should comment on this picture on the lower right. These are carriages. Carriages were built in Amesbury in particular, and these are carriages going over to Salisbury and to connect up to the main railroad rights of way. They are covered. These carriages are covered with a white muslin to try to protect the carriages after they were completed, and they were called ghost trains. I'm told that these trains would leave the factories on Friday evening, and they would go through the countryside, and they were nicknamed the ghost trails, and the ghost trains, and you'll hear a reference to that later. The trains eventually in the early 1900s started going bankrupt. People moved to trucks instead of trains. And so these rights of way sat vacant for many, many years. And gradually, people started, community activists started to really lobby to try to get the use of these for trails, for walking trails and for biking trails. But it wasn't so easy. In the time that it intervened, there were a lot of these rights of way were given away to the electric company, to the gas company. Even the commuter rail had rights to some of these trails, and they didn't want to give them up. They wanted to be able to keep these for their utilities and maybe for future expansion of commuter rail. And we did a lot of work early on, we being the heritage area, to bring towns and communities and legislators together to say, we have got to have a solution. These things have been vacant for many, many years. People are walking on them anyway, they're using them. We need to move forward and try to make them into trails that are usable for communities. And we were quite successful with, by bringing a lot of people together, we were able to get a number of agreements struck that let towns use these trails with long-term easements in many cases. So here you see some of the early activities. You can see on the left, the rails. We were also successful early on in getting a company called Iron Horse to come in, and by giving them the rails, they were able to afford to pull the iron and the wood out of these trails and actually resell it. And that opened up the pathways, so we didn't have all this old steel in place. And so you can see on the upper right and the lower right, as volunteers, a lot of volunteer work started to lay out these the actual trail surfaces on these rights of way. Let's go to the next one. So where we are now, I would say about 2/3 of the trail is built off-road. One of the challenges in our region is we span what Essex County, one of the oldest counties in the United States, but we have no county government. So everything is done town by town. We have 34 cities and towns, about 20 are along this trail. And each one is sort of working on its own, trying to do pieces of this. So a very important part of the heritage area work is to help a bridge over town boundaries. So as I said, we were helpful getting sort of a bunch of politicians involved, not only the local officials, but also state officials involved. We've been helpful getting some federal funds in here. But a lot of work we've done is working with different community groups and volunteers to really help them get more capacity and to work across some of their town boundaries together. So we have about 2/3 of the trail done. So, as I said, some of it's paved and some of it's not. Some of this goes through wetlands. So we've been able to get develop a boardwalk system that has been accepted by our Mass Transportation Department. So that was quite an achievement to get them to finally accept having some of these boardwalks. So as I said, this is a mixed use trail. People use it to walk, ride bikes, roller skate, just a lot of fun. So, and parts of it go through some really beautiful marshlands. So in addition to going through town centers, they go through some really beautiful scenery that was really inaccessible before the trails were developed. We've also done a number of projects along the trails. There's been art along the trails. There's been some youth projects, particularly popular with scout groups to do a project. These are bat houses, but there've been little kiosks built by scouts and some art developed by scouts, part of a bridge, some signage projects. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see. Well, of course, why is it important? Well, I think you all know we all really want to have alternatives for not having always to be in our car, particularly for whether it's commuting or going to school or going to a local park. So obviously, particularly when you can build off-road trails, it's very important for health and safety, and it's certainly a much better way to ride your bike or walk. We have several volunteer advocates that have done a lot of work with us, including our board president, who's particularly gotten into this trail work because he his profession is he's a manager of Dana-Farber Cancer Center. And so the health benefits, he really sees the health benefits of having trails and having this kind of exercise. And we know that. I mean, when we first got involved in this trail work, several communities, there were some very vocal people against the trail. They had their homes next to the trail, and they didn't want those people walking or riding through their or near their property. And we did a lot of work to help work our way through that, the not in my backyard people. And now, of course, when you go to these communities where these trails are, people come out and say, oh my God, it's just wonderful. It's so fantastic to have the trails. It's really saved our life. I walk on it every day. And that whole negative attitude has gone away. But it's hard when you have that kind of change and people are living next to these trails. There's a huge push to not have them originally, particularly by the people living right on them. So let's see, it says here, yes, we've had to work with 20 different municipalities. There is variety between not only the trail, but also the various needs and priorities in these different communities. There's not always agreement where the best routes are. And there are a few cases we haven't been able to follow the railroad rights of way. We've had to go around them. And so sort of negotiating some of that is difficult. And again, what we try to do is fill in the gaps wherever we can, or help wherever we can. We have been successful in getting some federal funding, which has been very key to helping some of the trail design work. And we found it's a little bit easier to get trail construction money, but very difficult to get trail design money. So when we've been able to get some trail design money, that's been very key in helping communities work out some of the difficult design issues and road crossings and stuff. Successes, as I said, we've gotten quite a bit of the trail, particularly in the northern part of our heritage area built. There's a lot of support now, and we didn't originally start with support from our Massachusetts Office of Transportation, but they have become big supporters now, and that's been a huge sea change and wonderful. They're real bike and pedestrian advocates in the state agency that have been very helpful. Funding, of course, is always challenging, but we've cobbled together a lot of different sources. The communities have, the towns have, the states found sources of funding. And as it says, we really have a recognizable brand now with the Border to Boston. People like it, they're supportive of it. Even the communities where we're still trying to get the trail built, generally the consensus is very, very supportive because people have seen what a change it makes, what a wonderful asset it is for their community. So I guess the takeaway is it takes time. I mean, we've been on this for 25 years. So, hey, what does our board president say, Heather, this morning? He said it's for the eternal optimist.
Yeah, he says it's therapy for the perpetual optimist.
A lot of patience. And you learn from people's experience. We've had tremendous groups of volunteers that have pushed for this trail even longer than we have. We had a volunteer group we met with this morning, and they were out there again saying, oh, we got to work on this piece of it. If you build it, they will come. Yes, people love trails. They really are wonderful. And it's a lot of relationship building. So Heather, I think I sort of monopolized the whole time. You're newer to this project, but do you want to add some of your insights to it?
Annie, I think you've covered it mostly. All I'll say is that I'm in awe of the work that I've come to know and understand. And honestly, for many, I think it even goes back further than 25 years. And as a community member that has a gorgeous part of the rail trail in my backyard, I can speak to that as what an asset it is to the community. It helps you get from A to B. It's recreation. It makes you want to go out. And my connector brings me to Newburyport downtown. I want to go. I want to go out to lunch. It's an economic booster too. So it has so many benefits. And with this kind of work, from what I've heard in talking to a lot of the people who have been so involved with the project for these many years, it's often there's a vocal minority, and you have to kind of work through some of the challenges there, but the majority of people love it. And to be honest, it sounds like even that minority, once the trail is there and they see all the benefits that it offers, you know, they kind of change their tune a little bit. So it's work that is really valued by the people that live here, and it's really worth the time and the effort. And I'm very thankful that Annie and our partners and the local community here has not gotten discouraged from a lot of no's and pushed for those yeses. And here we are today with an almost complete 70-mile trail through our heritage area, which is so special. So that's just my little piece as someone who's newer to the project, and we'll take any questions for Annie.
And I think we're doing questions at the end, right?
Yeah, we were going to do questions at the end, but if you have to leave, I didn't know if that was, no, okay.
No, I think we'll be fine. So
Okay.
happy to. I don't want to go over, because I think you wanted us to stay within about 15 minutes each of us. So
Yep, that was
perfect.
Okay, great.
All right,
right.
well, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thanks Annie and Heather.
Sure.
So we'll transition a couple hours to the west and hear from Beth at Hudson River Valley.
Yeah, hi. Let's see. I'm gonna hopefully share my screen. And get it going. How's it look? Is it there?
Looks great.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Beth Campochiaro, and I'm the Trails Director for the Hudson River Valley Greenway and Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area. And I apologize if I have some stumbles. I developed this in conjunction with our Executive Director, Scott Keller, but for him to deliver, and at the last moment, he was unable to do so for health reasons. So you're stuck with me. But this presentation is going to focus mainly on the Empire State Trail website, some of the one of the digital assets that we developed in order to promote and meet the needs of the people within the National Heritage Area for information about the trail. The Hudson River Valley Greenway was created in 1991 by New York State, and it had a mandate to build a trail along both shores of the Hudson River. That was one of its most important mandates. The Greenway was made the management entity of the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area in 1996 because the areas are primarily overlapping. It's a 14-county area. So I probably will refer to the Greenway a lot, but really it's the same folks. We're all the same small group of people. So with this mandate to create a trail was some challenges, considering that 70% of access to the shores of the Hudson River are blocked by passenger and freight railroad, including, you know, one of the most busiest passenger lines in the United States for Amtrak. So building a trail along the river, direct physical access was never really feasible. And since 1991, the Greenway has worked on and designated portions of a trail between New York City and the Adirondacks. And we worked with all the communities between here and there, and worked with several consulting firms and identified a potential through route, while not with all of it having direct physical access to the river, but it made a couple of crossings and really started to look like an end-to-end route in 2015. And then in 2017, the Greenway was given the lead, and $123 million of a $200 million overall appropriation from New York State to build the Empire State Trail. But it had to be done by the end of 2020. The Empire State Trail is a 750-mile multi-use trail. It spans the state, so there is a north-south portion, and then there is an east-west portion. The east-west portion is primarily along the canal, the Erie Canalway Trail. And here you can see the three sections that the trail is broken up into. So the part that I'll be focusing mainly on is the Greenway Trail, which is our section, the north-south section. And a lot of that trail was already there. Both the Hudson Valley and the Erie Canalway sections was already there, but not all of it was completed. And our partners and the Greenway completed 58 projects that created over 180 miles of new off-road trail in that 4 years. And it was projected that 8.6 million people would use the trail annually. And we have implemented a passive trail user count program at 10 rotating and 2 static sites in the Hudson Valley. And as we approached completion of the trail and the public began using it, we really started getting a lot of requests for a website, a map guide, and a guidebook. That was really boosted by an article that the New York Times, we were fortunate enough that the New York Times did an article in November of 2021 that really piqued a lot of folks' interest, and people were looking for ways to explore the trail. And we had always intended to build a website, but it was just obviously the challenge, as was mentioned by the previous presenters, funding. And we wanted to have trip planning ability that was similar to what we have for our Hudson Greenway Water Trail website, which is a 256-mile trail of 118 sites along the Hudson River for kayaks and small boats. But we had to work within the New York State web framework that we already had mandated by the state, and we needed to have the map and trip planning features. And none of the other agencies had developed something like that yet. So it cost about $180,000 to develop and maintain over the first few years. So we wanted to keep the trail, the homepage and most of the features very simple, keep it clean, but with access to the most used features. The New York State web links are at the top. That is for all state websites. And on the trail, you can order a map guide. There are 3 segments for the Hudson Valley Trail, the Champlain Valley Trail, which is the Albany to Canadian border, and then the Erie Canalway Trail, which is the Buffalo to Albany portion. And then we have contact us and a site map. Down here. So the heart of the website is really the view map page. So that allows users to get in closer to the routes that they're trying to find. And that is also the part that took the most time to get working correctly. There are features like parking, restrooms, campgrounds, attractions, train stations, and lodging. And these appear when you zoom in. And lodging was the most challenging. And what we ended up doing was going with, I Love New York already had a pretty robust lodgings listings. And so we ended up going with what they had available. And we also got Google to add the Empire State Trail to their map. So in Google Maps, if you select biking or walking, you can search for directions along the Empire State Trail. And you can, and individual segment pages show weather, elevation changes, and allow you to download directions north-south or south-north. The activities page shows walking, bicycling, winter fun, picnicking, camping, overnight lodging, cultural attractions, and breweries and wineries, and horseback riding. So finding and determining which individual attractions to add was a really great challenge. And again, we relied on our partners at I Love New York and linking to their website rather than reinventing everything and just putting it all on our website. Theirs was already existing with constantly updated information. There's an FAQs page, and there are 13 different FAQs, navigation. You can download a GPS file of the trail, lodging, restrooms, allowable equipment, because Different sections of the trail have different allowable uses, depending on the finish of the trail or what's allowed in that area. Facilities, rentals, and accessibility. And we built this FAQs section off of the questions that we most were getting via email and phone from the public for using the trail. The trip planning feature includes, you can order the paper map, which initially we hadn't anticipated that there would be such a demand for, but it's quite a popular thing. And then there's GPS or a KMZ download of the route. Trail closures, that's a tricky one because it does require input from the public and the trail owners. We don't own and operate the trail, and it's hard to keep current information there except for kind of longer term closures, but that's something that is, you know, kind of a constant challenge. And the map guide, that's the paper map. So even though there's a lot of demand for it, it's really not meant as a trip planning, but it's for, it's not meant for navigation, but for trip planning. So seeing where things are and what section you might like to explore. We opted for a single map guide covering all 750 miles rather than a series of detailed map guides because they get out of date really fast. And the map guide provides a general overview, and then you can use it in conjunction with the website. And we also worked with a nonprofit organization, Parks and Trails New York, to produce guidebooks that are very detailed. And, you know, as with everything, and as mentioned by previous presenters, funding is always an issue. We have many partners that contributed to the cost, including the Northern Border Regional Commission, USDA, and other grants. Yes, is someone asking a question? Oh, okay, sorry. And then there are guidebooks, as I mentioned, produced in conjunction with Parks and Trails New York. There's the Hudson Champlain and the Erie segments each have a guidebook. And the Hudson Champlain one is the one that we helped fund, and that was $130,000. So the total cost for all three components was approximately $362,000. This is, well, it's the contact information for actually my executive director, Scott Keller. But you can see our websites and one for the water trail as well. And thank you for this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Beth. Great overview of how it connects to the website design and what you consider and what you need to put on a website when you're also developing a physical trail. So with that, we'll open it up for any questions you may have for either Essex or Hudson. Feel free to use the chat and I'll help facilitate that, or if you feel comfortable unmuting and asking the question, either way. All right, I'll start off with a question for Beth. So you mentioned the water trail. How do you connect the Greenway or the Empire Trail with the water trail? Are there just through signage? Are there usually kind of people using both the kind of on-land trail and the water trail in a similar trip? How do you connect those two?
I'm not sure that there are too many people that are going to plan a trip that utilizes both. There's usually one or the other. We have a separate website for the water trail, but both are linked from the Greenway's website. And what we are in the middle of doing is developing GIS layers that'll be accessible from the Greenway's website that will allow folks to turn on and off the land trail layer and the water trail layer. So the water trail is usually used mainly by folks that are looking to do an extended kayaking or canoe trip, mostly kayaking. And the Empire State Trail is mainly used by more long distance cyclists. But you can see on our maps water trail sites and the route of the trail. And so hopefully once we get those 2 layers on our website, you'll be able to kind of see the overlap.
Thank you.
Hey, Liz, I have a question for Annie.
Go ahead, Heather.
So Annie, in the pictures that you showed of the trail, the border to Boston trail, so some of them looked like they were gravel, some of them looked like it was paved, and some of them looked like boardwalk. Is it like that the whole way? Like, so different, because you talked about how different communities own different parts of it. So has each community like chosen specifically like what they're going to do, or is there a specific reason? And then like, obviously I would think that the paved portion would be way more expensive than the portion. And is that like part of it? Or I'm just curious, like how you determine, like some trails I know are like paved the whole way. And so I'm just curious.
So the trail has been, I would call cobbled together over the last 20 years. And you'll see that the earliest portions tend to be the stone dust or the gravel. They tended to be developed on the easiest portions that people could do with volunteers. And then some of the harder places where we really had to get the cooperation of the state, because the configuration of the trail or the crossings and all were involved. They were much more expensive. They were much more complicated. We were able to get some federal funds involved. And at this point, the federal funds are required. The trail has to be paved. So now we're going back and looking at some portions of the trail that are the stone dust or the gravel, and looking at maybe trying to upgrade those with the paved surface. That's both a question of getting the funding to do it, but in at least one community, they're not sure they want it. They actually kind of like the stone dust. So they're not sure they want to go, even though they'd like more funding, they'd like to repair some pieces of the trail. They're not sure they want to go that way. So it is kind of the way that thing grew up. In fact, there have been multiple and different sources of funding, and some of these pieces were totally funded locally by the town and by volunteers. So it is a little weird, but in general, as the trail goes forward and gets more finished, I think it's almost all of it's going to be paved finally, eventually. And it is a better surface for most uses to have it paved.
Well, that's what I was going to do as a follow-up. Like, do the paved portions get more visitation than like the rock, or does it really not matter? Just the,
it doesn't matter in terms of use, as far as I can tell. But it's certainly the paved portions last better. They're less likely to get washed out. Some of these rights of way are still used by the utility companies, by the gas company, by the electric company. And when they go on the stone dust surface, they can really rip it up. So there's a maintenance problem with it. So our preference in general would be to go with the paved surface. Lasts better. It's better for people that want to rollerblade and things. Also, on the other hand, as I said, not every town sure they want it. Some people like a little more rural feel of the stone dust.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Britt from Delaware and Lehigh.
Yep. Hi there. I was just wondering, in terms of, I'm sure you had a group of partners working on these, the trail network. So this could be for either Annie or Beth to speak on if possible. But did you find, could you speak on the points that really helped build momentum within that group you had gathered around trails? Was it focusing on the trail gaps, focusing on the tourism, recreation opportunities within the community? Was it, I just wonder, we help work on the Link Trail Network here in our region, and we have a group of partners, but there's so many things you can focus on when you're looking at a trail network. And I just wonder if there's any just sticky points that you guys could recommend from your experience about what really worked in your group to galvanize and focus on and build that momentum and excitement and keep it growing. and moving forward, if you could.
Sure. I mean, I'll just say from our standpoint, the impetus for these trails really came from the local communities and from strong community activists. I see they a little bit more the biking group. The walking group was important, but the biking group was particularly important. And they had gotten these things going. They had seen these trails. They were annoyed, they were starting to use them, even though they were muddy, even though they had railroad ties. They were trying to use them at least to walk along them, and they're really pushing. And so then we came in and just helped add more oomph to it, and were able to kind of again bridge some of the bring in other help. We were able to, because of our position, we were able to bring in state legislators or get these different communities together and say, you got to get together on dealing with the Mass Electric Company, and this is how we might be able to help on that. Or we should band together and see if we can get this sort of federal funding. So we did not, I would say we were more followers than leaders. We looked at what was going on in the individual communities. And again, we don't have county government. Everything's done town by town, little group. And we just looked at how we could build and enhance what they were doing. But they provided the initial incredible, and in some cases, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years working on the same bit of trail, just pushing.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I could add to that, I'd say our experience is similar. The Greenway had been around since 1991, and we had been working on community-based trails that entire time. And before the infusion of funds from the state to build the Empire State Trail, it had been done on, each section had been done on very little money and a lot of initiative from the communities themselves. And this was the first time we were able to show, okay, the Erie Canalway, the Canal Corp has been working on these trails going east-west, then we've been working on these north-south trails. A lot of this is already done. If you just gave us some money, we could kind of link these all together and kind of present a vision. And I think that's what got the buy-in from the state. But each section, even down to each individual community, a lot of times it comes down to what that area wants. You kind of have to shift your focus. There are a lot of things that you can emphasize, whether it's health benefits of trails. I mean, I've been working on trails for 20 years. So whether it's health benefits, whether it's economic benefits, whether it's, highlighting the historic and the environmental assets that your community has, each person is going to take their own thing away from it. And the idea is to just get them all to work together towards this one vision. But you are always going to have those holdouts of, Annie had mentioned, NIMBYism and but what we've seen time and time again is once it's there, it's used and it's appreciated, and you've created a whole new group of stewards for this resource. So
thank you.
I mean, you asked a little about kind of, was there a tourism angle to it, or the economic development?
Because what I wonder too is, like, you can get partners in a room and they could even be on board, but like, what's the, some of the insights of, this is the way that we really, the way that we were steering those partners, or what we got out of those partner meetings. So you get everybody in a room, but I wondered, like, if you're leading those gatherings, what topics, whether it was the tourism or it was trail gaps, if there's something that seemed to really get your group all on board, because there's different ways that everybody can get excited. And sometimes it's like a matter of, focusing, but I know tourism could be one of them.
So I would say, in our case, it was sort of really the local benefits and the local benefits for residents. And I think trails do have a benefit for tourists. Some places, I'm told, it really is a great tourist attraction. I think it will eventually be an attraction here when the whole trail gets built, and particularly as part of the East Coast Greenway. But that's not our first focus at all. Our focus is really again on what are the specific local benefits for those communities that are near the trail.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Annie or Beth? I don't see any in the chat. I'll ask another one. For either of you, I'm sure the width of the trail, or obviously we've already talked about the material of the trail, can change throughout the whole expanse of it. But I know some heritage areas have hosted foot races or bike races on the trails that they have. And I'm wondering if that's something for the Empire State Trail or for this Border to Boston, or if those aren't really, doesn't have the capacity to hold that type of event.
So I'll answer quickly that we haven't. Our trail is has to be about 12 feet. It's not that wide. And again, we're so focused on the local benefits. I think communities have done stuff. So the community of Newburyport has done certainly done something on it, but we haven't tried to do a regional event at this point.
Yeah, with such a vast area for the Empire State Trail, we haven't tried to do one that encompasses the entire thing. But Parks and Trails New York does do a Cycle the Hudson Valley trip that they are planning, and it's like a supported ride that it starts in Troy, and then they go all the way to New York City, and you have interpretation by guides, and you have your meals and all of that built in to this predetermined ride that they sponsor. So that is something. And we did have a group that did not a one-time thing, but more of where you sign up. So you're riding or walking or running the Empire State Trail, and you kind of log the sections that you've completed. Most multi-use trails is when you're talking about width, for a multi-use trail that's going to be able to support cycling, running, strollers, rollerblades, those kind of things. You're looking at 10-foot wide. So I don't know if you'd want to do too big of a foot race or something like that, but Parks and Trails New York does know, how many people they can take, and there's pre-registration, and so there's trips like that are possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking of how that could kind of relate both to like a local recreational use, but then tie into tourism that comes with maybe participants coming from other places and then needing other kind of hospitality service industries along the trail. I see a question in the chat from Virginia Gardner. I may have missed this. Are or were agricultural land use conflicts an issue in either of these trails? And if so, how addressed and hopefully overcome?
So we have not. These were existing rights of way laid out for a variety of railroads, because there were competing railroads in this region. The one issue we have had, and we have not resolved it, is a portion of this one railroad right of way goes through a state park that's used for hunting. It's very popular around hunters, and they have been very resistant to having the trail go through. They don't want the trail developed. They think it'll impact their hunting. And we were just talking about this actually this morning, about what we could do to try to push back a bit. We think you can have both can exist, and it's a shame not to have the trail go through this really beautiful area. And they can't hunt there all year round either. So, but we haven't made much headway on that yet.
Yeah, at least the portion that the Greenway was responsible for, which is a 36-mile route called the Albany-Hudson Electric Trail, that was a former electric trolley line that then became a right-of-way for National Grid, which is one of our electric companies in this area. So yeah, that was already owned. The corridor was completely owned by Albany or by National Grid. The main issue was that some of the homeowners weren't even aware that this section behind their house, the adjacent landowners, that weren't had assumed that it was their property. We weren't aware of some of the right-of-way issues, and so there was an education process that had to take place. And I think there was one adjacent landowner that did have like a crossing for his cows or something like that, and we just had to work out, okay, you know, we can do some slight reroutes and things like that to work around things like that. But yeah, it's you know, since it was already under ownership of the utility, it wasn't as much of an issue as it might be in another area.
Thanks. Any other questions for our presenters? Any other heritage areas that also have trails that want to share kind of from their experience?
Yeah, I'll just very, very quickly, you know, our trail program is pretty different than what's been described here today. And it's really designed and geared toward a long distance cyclist, you know, rather than being an accommodating multi-purpose, multi-use trail. So we connect with, you know, as Annie does, with the East Coast Greenway in Norwalk, Connecticut. And it's a long distance cycling route that traverses Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont, and terminates at the Canadian border where it meets Velo, Quebec's route vert. So it's a serious, you know, long distance cycling route. We're looking at, you know, things like maybe membership program whereby we can enlist the, you know, financial support of lodging and cycling services along the way, but it's really in the initial stages. But this is very interesting to hear, you know, how these other trail programs are progressing. And I'm a little bit envious that, you know, there's all those rail beds out there. We wish we had some of those in the western part of the state, but they're just very sparse out this way. But thank you to both the presenters today. It's very informative.
Thanks, Dan, for sharing that. Any last questions or comments? Well, thank you all for joining the April Best Practices call. And hopefully with the nice weather, at least hopefully you're having some nice weather as the spring is coming, that you'll be able to get out on some local trails yourself. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Thanks for organizing this.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Liz,
Thank you
for
so
stepping
much.
in.
Yep, no problem.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah.